Zulfi Bhutto of Pakistan. His Life and Times by Stanley Wolpert. Chapter 7. Winters of his Discontent, 1965 to 1969. Zulfi flew to Tashkent on the eve of his 38th birthday to attend the peace conference, to which Premier Alexei Kosygin had invited Prime Minister Shastri of India and President Ayub Khan of Pakistan. That first South Asian summit in the USSR's Central Asian capital was convened on 4th January 1966. Sardar Swaran Singh and Defense Minister Y.B. Chavan accompanied Shastri, and Minister of Information Habibullah Shahabuddin and his secretary Altaf Gohar accompanied Ayub and Bhutto. Zulfi's intense dislike of Altaf Gohar dated from Tashkent because Ayub confided more in the secretary who was ghostwriting his autobiography than he did in his by now mistrusted foreign minister. Ayub would not be ready to sack Bhutto for another 6 months, yet both men knew that their days of wine and hunting together were over. Much as had happened in the White House, Ayub went off to chat with Shastri immediately after the first day's formalities ended. Bhutto tried to join them, but the field marshal shook his head and extended a stem forefinger, making Zulfi back off. If, after Washington, Zulfi retained any residual doubts as to his position in Ayub's cabinet and in his heart, the last would disappear in Tashkent's frigid environment. Zulfi was hypersensitive to how others felt about him and picked up every nuance of voice and body language, especially of those above him on the power ladder he had resolved to climb to the top. Swaran Singh's walkout from the Security Council when Zulfi spoke last there was bad enough. That sort of rudeness was to be expected from the enemy, as Zulfi now thought of India and its highest officials. Ayub's snubs cut deeper, for while the president met daily alone with Shastri, as he did with Altaf, Zulfi was left to sit in another room and listen to Swaran Singh and watch his too familiar gestures. They both went through the stale arguments on everything from why they could not discuss the future of Kashmir to prisoners of wars and confiscated cargo. Zulfi was frustrated and bored. Kosygin worked hard that week in Tashkent, shuttling between Ayub and Shastri when they were not locked together, arguing in Hindustani, trying to reach some agreement that could dispel the hovering clouds of war from the Himalayan heights in Kashmir. Altaf typed a 2-page draft on an agreement Ayub was ready to sign, but Shastri, as Kuldeep Nayyar, who flew with Shastri to Tashkent as member of the Indian Press Corps, put it, was tougher negotiator, raising a last-minute request for a no-war clause. So Ayub wrote in his own hand on that typed draft from Pakistan, would renounce the use of force in settling disputes with India. Then Shastri agreed to the draft. Bhutto hit the ceiling when he read the insert in the pages Ayub later showed him, threatening to fly home to expose Ayub's treacherous surrender to all of Pakistan. Ayub felt constrained to delete the insert, though Altaf and Minister Shahabuddin agreed to it, as did Pakistan Commerce Minister Ghulam Farooq. They all knew, however, that Zulfi was the most popular figure in Pindi and Lahore as well as in Karachi and Larkana, and to risk antagonizing him enough that he would fly home alone would be tantamount to igniting a new revolution. So Ayub resiled. Bhutto immediately called Andre Gromyko, who was with Shastri when the telephone rang. Zulfi tried diplomatically to explain that Ayub had agreed to renounce force only because India had agreed to a plebiscite in Kashmir. Gromyko's angry reply, "It is a lie." Here again, it was Zulfi Bhutto's hard line, his tougher stand that Ayub's on negotiating with India, his absolute refusal to be cowed or to give up Kashmir, that more accurately reflected the feelings of most Pakistanis, at least in the West. Then did the position of the more moderate Ayub, whose days of robust health as of power were by now much diminished. Kosygin and Foreign Minister Gromyko were obliged to use their most persuasive powers on Lal Bahadur Shastri in the final days of the Tashkent summit, for Zulfi had stalemated Ayub by his rage and threats. India's army was poised and waiting in Punjab to move against Lahore if the talks broke down. Shastri knew the dangers of withdrawal without a no war pact or clause in the Tashkent Declaration, but was sick of war, having spent most of his days in high office fighting on one front or another. He was weary as well of the tough negotiations in cold Central Asia. On 10th January 1966, Shastri and Ayub signed a declaration. Bhutto refused to allow it to be called an agreement, stating their firm resolve to restore normal and peaceful relations between their countries and to promote understanding and friendly relations between their peoples. By the end of February, all troops were to be withdrawn by both countries to positions they had held prior to 5th August 1965, and both sides agreed to observe the ceasefire terms on the ceasefire line. It was hardly a diplomatic victory for either side, yet perhaps it accurately reflected the battlefield realities the conference had been called to articulate. Lal Bahadur Shastri retired to his dacha at about 10 o'clock after attending a Soviet banquet to celebrate the declaration. He was to stop in Kabul next day on his flight home to Delhi. Ayub had invited him to stop in Pindi as well, for those two leaders had come to respect one another after a week of often acerbic meetings. Ayub considered Shastri a man of peace who gave his life for amity between India and Pakistan. Shortly after 1 a.m., Shastri was awakened by the sharp pain of his third fatal heart attack. His physician, R. N. Chugh, was asleep in another room and reached too late to resuscitate his patient. Death occurred at 2 a.m. on 11th January 1966. Ayub Khan, who looked and sounded genuinely grieved, served as one of Shastri's pallbearers, a personal act of Indo-Pakistan friendship. Bhutto was also awakened early, and his foreign secretary reportedly told him, "The bastard's dead." Zulfi asked, "Which one?" Zulfi never forgave Ayub for having humiliated him in front of Nusrat. He was too proud a Vadero to allow anyone to chastise him, as Ayub Khan had done, for what he considered solely his own business. He was, after all, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the upstart general who was a field marshal thanks to Bhutto's ingenuity, was no more than a Pathan commoner, a brash usurper of presidential powers, Washington's stooge and messenger boy. Ayub's bungling weakness in the war with India, just concluded in such abject failure, was the final straw. "I had submitted my resignation in Tashkent," Zulfi later recalled, "but Ayub Khan implored me to withdraw it in the national interest." On the return flight, Zulfi knew that his days of living in his military dictator's long shadow were almost over. 8 years was enough. Not only his birth, but his brains, his guts, his Pakistani spirit, and courage were all better, stronger than Ayub's. Zulfi had long sensed a mystic identity with Pakistan, with his people, and that was enough to sustain and support him, no matter what a stupid old general or weak dictator might say or try to order him to do. Ayub would soon learn that no one was powerful enough to humiliate or order Zulfikar Ali Bhutto around. He nominally remained foreign minister till June. But the day after reaching Rawalpindi, Zulfi flew home to Larkana, where he stayed at Al Murtaza for more than a month, hunting and planning his next moves. He was pushed out, Mumtaz said, talking of what Ayub had done to Zulfi. But then I think he was not too sorry. The timing was perfect. He was the hero of Tashkent and everything worked for him. At Larkana, Zulfi had, of course, taken Mumtaz, his brother, Ada, as they called each other in Sindhi, into his confidence, discussing with him his plans for leaving the unpopular government and starting a new party, a people's party, one that would appeal to Pakistan's masses, to its workers and peasants as well as vaderos. Zulfi consulted many other intimates at this time as well, including Sheikh Kaisar Rashid, who had served under him as director of the foreign ministry and would remain his confidant, a companion in the darkest days of his depression, one of the few men he ever trusted. Another of his closest friends was Ghulam Mustafa Khar, who had become a regular visitor to my home. Zulfi recalled after his first election to the National Assembly 3 years later. Mustafa Jitoi and Khar were inseparable in those days, and Jitoi always brought Khar along to Zulfi's place. The younger man, who was soon to be known as Sher-e Punjab, Lion of the Punjab, became Bhutto's favorite nocturnal party buddy and one of those early committed to Zulfi's embryonic People's Party. Not Jatoi, however, for he kept on good terms with Ayub as well as Zulfi after their split, which on later reflection Zulfi considered typical Jatoi behavior, finding his old Vadero friend deep as the deepest well in Sindh's desert. After Tashkent, Ayub had gone off to hunt in Jatoi's pie forests at Nawabshah, confiding to Zulfi's old friend how he was going to fix Zulfi, which Jatoi, of course, relayed to Bhutto the next time they met. They continued to meet socially because Jatoi's passionate first wife, Maria, had been one of Zulfi's special favorites from the very first time he laid eyes on her. Bengali born J.A. Rahim, intellectual, the oration of Zulfi's new party, was also recruited by Bhutto from among his foreign ministry friends. Rahim had been a member of the Indian Civil Service prior to partition, joining the Pakistan Foreign Service at its inception, rising through its ranks to become the ambassador in Paris. Zulfi got to know Rahim more intimately during his flying visit to France in 1965, for Rahim also enjoyed late drinking parties. Paris was his last assignment before his mandatory retirement. Rahim's father, Sir Abdur Rahim, had been a judge on Pakistan's High Court and Speaker of the Central Assembly, and a close friend of Suharwardi's, whom J.A. had met in his Kacheri Road house in Karachi. Zulfi needed someone with J.A.'s knowledge and wealth of experience, and would for almost a decade keep Rahim's brain on tap, first in founding the People's Party and then in his cabinet, until the night Rahim offended him in 1975 and almost paid with his life for having left Zulfi's dinner party before the Raja of Larkana, as J.A. dared to call Bhutto, made his inordinately late entrance. Zulfi was never one to take an insult to his izzat, honor, lightly. The only jokes he enjoyed were those he sarcastically aimed at the egos of others. Ayub stopped at Larkana after finishing his hunt in Nawabshah in mid-February to urge his lame duck foreign minister to speak out in favor of the Tashkent Declaration in the National Assembly. Opposition party pressures kept mounting to hold public debate on the war of 1965, which had recklessly endangered the lives of 50 million East Pakistanis in the West's adventure to liberate Kashmir. Ayub Khan had been attacked from all sides since his failure to win Operation Grand Slam, and the opposition tide kept rising in the aftermath of Tashkent, from the east as well as in the west. He had tried his best to save Pakistan, Ayub felt, and thought he had done a decent job of having averted greater disaster in signing the peace agreement with India. Yet now he was viewed as the weak villain, while Zulfi Bhutto's popularity kept rising. So Ayub broke his journey in Larkana and stayed in Al Murtaza, persuading, or as Zulfi preferred to put it, begging me to return to Rawalpindi. Pathetically, Ayub wanted Zulfi to come to the defense of his government in the assembly debate. He was determined to keep me associated with his government at all costs until he had re established his authority. Zulfi reflected later on this murky episode of his political career. Ayub still hoped to advance the prospects of Indo Pakistan friendship in the spirit of Tashkent, which his long private talks with Shastri had embodied. He replied to Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, Shastri's successor from Larkana, the same day he received her message, handed to him there by High Commissioner Kanwal Singh, that India was ready to resume flights to Pakistan. I am glad to learn of your constructive decision in the matter, which is of mutual benefit to India and Pakistan. I am also issuing immediate instructions to our civil and military authorities to permit the resumption of air flights on the same basis as that prior to 1st of August 1965. He went on to express his hope that lasting peace would soon return to the subcontinent, and concluded by stating his personal admiration for the positive manner in which Mrs. Gandhi had responded to the Tashkent Declaration. Zulfi's response to his appeal for support in the upcoming assembly debate was also positive, but hardly what Ayub had hoped for or anticipated. Bhutto rose on the National Assembly floor on 16th March 1966 after prolonged acerbic attacks against the government for its mishandling of the war, most of which came from the opposition ranks of members from East led by the Venerable Shah Azizur Rahman. What is our state and what is our status? He began in what Ayub had thought would be his government's major rebuttal speech, but which Zulfi wrote and delivered as the opening salvo of his own still inchoate Pakistan's People Party. What are our objectives? What are our motivations? Pakistan is a great ideal. A member of this house has said that Pakistan is a man made country. Pakistan is not just a man made country, it is a God made country. It is a beautiful thought. It is a creation of excellence. That is what Pakistan is. Not just the sandy desert of Sindh or the rugged nobility of Balochistan and the enchanting lushness of Bengal or the inspiring plains of the Punjab or the raw courage of the land of the Pathans. Indeed, all these things go to make Pakistan. But there is something much more to Pakistan. It is the blessing of Allah. Pakistan is the creation of the surge of Islamic nationhood. Pakistan is the product of an earth shaking idea. It is a revolution cut out of the heart of history. Pakistan is a live revolution. The modifier live was, of course, understood by all who heard him as Zulfi's implicit judgment that Ayub's revolution of 1958 was now dead. Zulfi waxed more romantic, almost poetic, as his imagination soared. In his speeches at the UN the year before, he had touched the hearts of millions of Pakistanis. Here, he was speaking directly to Pakistan's elite in the National Assembly. Pakistan is a mystical idea. Pakistan is the heartthrob of the people. Pakistan is the culmination of the aspirations of the Islamic order. Exulted this youthful foreign minister of Ayub's dying regime a year and a half before the birth of his Pakistan People's Party. But with that party already born in his mind, I now come to the war. History knows of two wars. One is the immoral war of avarice and exploitation, and the other is a war of resistance against domination and exploitation, a war of national assertion. Small powers have stood against mighty empires. Little people have had to fight for their freedom, and they have succeeded because theirs have been just war. A just war cannot fail, no matter how great is the empire that is pitted against it. In what category does the struggle of the people of Jammu and Kashmir fall? Could any among those hundreds of elected representatives of the people of Pakistan disagree with his answer? Was there an opposition leader so old or so cold? But is it fair for the foreign minister of Pakistan to pronounce whether we fought a war of exploitation or whether we fought a just war? The whole world supported the people of Jammu and Kashmir during the September War. Have you ever asked yourself, why is it that the international community supported Pakistan in the September War against India? They supported Pakistan because the struggle of the people of Jammu and Kashmir was a just struggle. The world of Islam, perhaps for the first time in its history of 1300 years, was united right from Algeria to Indonesia in support of Pakistan. Because ours was a struggle for the cause not only of our people of Jammu and Kashmir, but because our fight and our struggle was for a better world order, a finer society, for greater justice and articulation of right against wrong. And that is why 5 million people of Jammu and Kashmir and the people of Pakistan were supported by the Afro-Asian countries, by the world of Islam. India, in size and territory, in resources and in diplomatic ingenuity, continued the most ingenious or at least the most imaginative diplomat of his day, is a great country. India is like Europe, the whole of Europe without Russia, yet it stood alone for rhetorical reasons. Zulfi now conveniently scuttled his earlier, equally inaccurate argument that both the United States and the Soviet Union solidly backed India in the war. So they stood absolutely alone, forsaken and naked in this struggle, and the late Lal Bahadur Shastri, at the height of the war, had to say that India is all alone. India, Europe without Soviet Union, standing against the Denmark of Asia. Why? Because justice was with us. Zulfi then argued that India was the aggressor. It must be clearly understood that Pakistan did not start this war, but we had every moral and legitimate reason and justification to support the people of Jammu and Kashmir in their legitimate right for self-determination. We are ourselves the product of self-determination. We support Bellum, a just war of the people for their liberation. In spite of that, many patriotic friends of ours have said our defenses were bad and we took a terrible risk, that it was possibly an venturism and that there was an element of immaturity in it. Ayub's words of reprimand, spoken in the darkest moments of martial despair, under the stress of learning that Indian armor had rolled within range of Lahore, were words Zulfi would never forgive. Adventurism, immaturity, the truth often hurts. Just as Zulfi could never admit he had been wrong in predicting an Indian strike at Bengal rather than into Punjab, he now adamantly refused to accept Ayub's reproach. This is not so. It must be appreciated and understood that this was a heroic struggle. This was a heroic support for a great and noble cause. This is one of the factors which makes Pakistan great and which will make Pakistan a pioneer and a pillar of strength and morality for the whole of Asia and Africa. Out of the days and sleepless nights of dark depression, he'd known as he tired of war turned against Pakistan, out of the personal humiliation and rejection he had felt in Washington and Tashkent. Zulfi had formulated his plan. He would not only lead Pakistan at the helm of a new People's Party, but forge a third world alliance of all Muslim, Asian, and African peoples, most of the world being kept down by the great powers. It was to become the ultimate goal of his life to lead Pakistan, to energize and transform his people into a pillar of strength and morality for the whole of Asia and Africa to follow. Soaring like skyscrapers, he had once personalized in New York. Let us look at history. Zulfi continued, for he liked to think himself a student of history. If the whole world can be plunged into the war of 1914 for the assassination of an archduke, should we not be committed to the 5 million people of Jammu and Kashmir and support them in their struggle for independence? In 1939, Britain and France declared war against Germany because there was a commitment to support the international frontiers of Poland. A commitment had to be honored, and that is why Britain and France are great powers. What happened in Korea? Again, nations fought, a war of liberation and a just war. Can Kashmir be an exception? The argument that the future of 50 million people of East Pakistan was jeopardized for 5 million people of Jammu and Kashmir is a pathetic argument. It is a bankrupt and an immoral argument. Then you will say, let Balochistan go, let Sindh go, and parts of Pakistan will be slowly and gradually swallowed up by India. It must not be forgotten that it is not just Jammu and Kashmir which is at stake. India cannot tolerate the existence of Pakistan, and that is why, on the pretext of Jammu and Kashmir war was unleashed on Pakistan. That is why 12 or more of India's finest divisions, whose guns and wheels were greased by great powers, made an onslaught on Sialkot and Lahore to destroy Pakistan. Because in the destruction of Pakistan lay India's most sublime and finest dreams. But the aggressor was brought to a halt. Then Zulfi rewrote the epic struggle which he dubbed a most glorious chapter in the glory-studded history of Pakistan, which stood like an impregnable wall. This nation stood to a man against the terrible onslaught. Ours was a might victory. It was a victory of the people of Pakistan. A glittering crown was worn by the armed forces of Pakistan. Few things are important to Pakistanis than military prowess, and Zulfi Bhutto's tributes to the armed forces would soon help him to wean them from their top generals, first Ayub Khan and later his successor Yahya Khan. Zulfi insisted that for 200 years we have not fought a war. Our people have fought in Tripoli, they have fought in Italy, they have died in foreign lands fighting for their foreign powers. But what a magnificent and beautiful difference there is in fighting for your own country. We are talking in terms of losing 5,000 men or so. 100 million people of Pakistan have fought a war. We never lost anyone. Each one is a martyr to the greatness of Pakistan. Each one of them has contributed to the glory of Pakistan. These lives have never been lost. They can never be forgotten. We were the smaller country pitted against a powerful one, and we could not only hold that country at bay, but ours was the victory. Pakistanis who heard such oratory could not help but feel the thrill of national pride. Was it any wonder they would soon hail him as Qaid-e-Awam? Now, I come to the famous Tashkent Declaration, Zulfi announced after speaking for more than an hour. Then slowly and painfully he read out each word of each article of the declaration, after which he reiterated for each article. The Prime Minister of India and the President of Pakistan agree. That initially innocent sounding phrase was repeated so often in so lugubrious, so sarcastic a tone that it soon acquired the chilling character of Mark Antony calling Brutus an honorable man in his funeral oration for Caesar. About the fourth article, he explained the Prime Minister of India and the President of Pakistan have agreed that both sides will discourage any propaganda against each other. Now, it is a different thing to pursue one's legitimate right to support the right cause and indulge in propaganda. Propaganda means vilification. Propaganda means slander. Propaganda means abuse. No respectable and self respecting country would like to indulge in propaganda. This is not our policy. We do not indulge in propaganda. But as far as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, as far as the question of liberation is concerned, as far as the question of eviction of Muslims is concerned, as far as the question of justice is concerned, we are not precluded from espousing and propagating these clauses. I tell you, we are true, Zulfi declared in closure. There can be no force, no strength greater than truth. Truth is on our side. History has shown that truth is on our side. India will have to abandon its colony in Jammu and Kashmir. Our cause can only succeed if we pursue our struggle because ours is an honorable struggle, sanctified by law and protected by Allah. It was hardly surprising that Ayub Khan should start suffering from high blood pressure and heart problems soon after Zulfi's address to the National Assembly. He had, after all, specially stopped in Larkana to request to urge his foreign minister to speak out in support of his government and its diplomatic commitments.